I thought I was running from one groom, but the man waiting in the alley needed a wife more than the one I had left behind. The ballroom doors closed behind me with a soft golden click, too gentle for the sound of a life breaking open. Music still played on the other side. Violins, champagne laughter, polite applause for a wedding that had not happened yet. I could still hear my name floating through the hotel corridor in whispers. Hannah Miller. The bride. The girl with the perfect lace dress, the perfect pearl earrings, the perfect groom waiting beneath a ceiling full of chandeliers. Perfect was what people called a cage when it matched the flowers. My dress dragged behind me as I ran toward the service exit, heavy with beadwork and panic. The hem caught on the corner of a brass luggage cart, tearing with a sharp little sound that made me flinch. I did not stop. I could not stop. Not after what I had heard in the coat room 10 minutes earlier, when Caleb Price lowered his voice and forgot the door was cracked open. After midnight, her signature is all we need, he had said. The debt transfers clean. Hannah will not even understand the paperwork until it is too late. I stood there with my bouquet in both hands and felt every white rose turn into a witness. Debt. Transfer. Signature. 3 words that explain the rush, the expensive hotel, the pressure from his parents, the way Caleb had smiled whenever I asked why the documents had to be signed during the reception. He had called them estate forms. Marriage formalities. A way to protect our future. But I knew what protection sounded like when it was really a leash. My mother had lived under one for years, smiling in church while my stepfather made every choice small enough to fit inside his pocket. I had promised myself I would never mistake control for love. Then I almost married it in satin. The service hallways smelled like lemon cleaner, rain-soaked coats, and hot food waiting under silver lids. My heels slipped on the polished floor. I yanked them off and kept running barefoot, the marble cold enough to sting. Behind me, someone called my name. Maybe a bridesmaid. Maybe Caleb. I shoved through the exit door and burst into the alley behind the hotel. Chicago rain hit my face like a slap. The city outside was dark and wet, all black brick, steam rising from vents, garbage bins shining under security lights. I took 3 steps before I realized the alley was not empty. 4 black SUVs waited in a silent line, engines humming low, headlights off. Men in dark suits stood near the vehicles, not talking, not smoking, not surprised by the rain. Every instinct in my body screamed that I had run out of one trap and straight into another. One of the men stepped toward me. I backed up so fast my shoulder hit the brick wall. "Do not touch me," I said, though my voice shook hard enough to betray me. The man stopped immediately. Not because I scared him. Because someone behind him lifted one hand. The rear door of the middle SUV opened. A man stepped out into the rain without hurrying. Tall. Broad-shouldered. White skin, dark hair pushed back from a face made of sharp lines and colder patience. His black suit looked untouched by chaos, as if storms waited for his permission before ruining anything. The men around him shifted without a word. The alley belonged to him. He looked at my torn dress, my bare feet, the bouquet crushed against my chest, and finally the ring still burning on my finger. His mouth curved slightly, not kindly. "Perfect," he said. I needed a wife. I stared at him, rain sliding down my face like tears I refused to give Caleb. "I am not marrying another monster tonight." The man's gray eyes held mine. For a moment, the alley went so quiet I could hear water dripping from the fire escape above us. Then he said, "Good. Then do not marry. Negotiate. Negotiate." The word sounded absurd in the rain, standing barefoot in an alley with my wedding dress torn at the hem and a stranger in a black suit watching me like I had become useful at the exact wrong moment. "I do not negotiate with men who introduce themselves by needing wives," I said. His mouth almost moved again, not quite a smile, not quite approval. Vincent Cross. The name hit the alley before the rain could soften it. I knew it the way people in Chicago knew certain names without ever being formally taught. Cross Holdings. Cross Restaurants. Cross Construction. Cross Charities with annual galas where senators smiled too hard. And beneath all of that, whispered stories my mother used to lower her voice around. Men who did not need to raise their hands because the city had already learned to move out of their way. My fingers tightened around the crushed bouquet. You are worse than Caleb. Possibly. The honesty startled me. But tonight, I am not the man who put debt papers inside a wedding reception. My stomach went cold. How do you know about that? Vincent glanced toward the hotel's service door. Because Caleb Price was supposed to meet me in that ballroom after midnight. The rain seemed to fall harder. Behind me, the music inside swelled, muffled by brick and steel, cheerful enough to make me feel sick. Meet you for what? To offer your signature as collateral for a debt he cannot pay. The alley tilted. I had heard enough in the coat room to run, but not enough to understand the shape of the trap. Collateral. The word made my skin crawl because it turned me from a bride into paperwork. No, I whispered. I never agreed to anything. That is why he needed the ceremony. Vincent's voice stayed low, controlled, almost gentle in its precision. A wife is easier to pressure than a fiancé with cold feet. I wanted to hate him for saying it so plainly. Instead, the truth sat between us like a broken glass neither of us could pretend not to see. A sharp knock sounded from the service door behind me. Once. Twice. Caleb's voice followed, smooth and strained. Hannah? Honey, open the door. Everyone is worried. Honey. The word slipped through the rain wearing the same costume it had worn for 8 months. Soft. Loving. Owned. I stepped away from the door so quickly I nearly tripped on my own dress. Vincent moved 1 inch, just enough for one of his men to place himself between me and the entrance without touching me. Do you want to go back inside? Vincent asked. I stared at him. Is that a joke? No, his eyes did not leave mine. I do not make decisions for women who are running from men who already did. Something in my chest tightened. It should not have mattered. One decent sentence from a dangerous stranger should not have felt like air. But it did. Caleb knocked again, harder this time, though still polite enough for anyone listening. Hannah, this is embarrassing. Come inside and we can fix it. I laughed once, a small cracked sound. Fix it, I repeated. He means finish it. Vincent's gaze sharpened, not at me, but at the door. Then here is the negotiation. I looked back at him, rain dripping from my veil onto my shoulders. I need to appear at my estate tonight with a wife. Not in a bedroom. Not at an altar. In a room full of people trying to force an alliance I did not choose. That sounds like your problem. It is. He inclined his head slightly. And Caleb is yours. The honesty again. No sugar. No false rescue. Just 2 cages placed side by side in the rain. You want me to pretend to be your wife? For 72 hours. And in return? My attorneys remove your name from every document Caleb prepared. My people make sure he cannot reach you without witnesses. You get a phone, a room with a lock on your side, and transportation anywhere you choose when the agreement ends. I swallowed. That sounds rehearsed. Because consent should be specific. The sentence landed harder than his name had. I hated that I liked it. I hated that Caleb, with his church smile and soft hands, had never once spoken to me like my yes mattered as much as my no. The service door handle rattled. Caleb's voice dropped lower. Hannah, do not make me come out there. Vincent held my gaze. Your terms. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out the rain. I looked at the door. Then at the SUVs. Then at the man who had asked for a wife like a king ordering weather, and somehow still waited for my answer. 3 conditions, I said. Separate room. My own phone. And if I say stop, this ends immediately. Vincent nodded once. Agreed. The service door opened behind us, spilling gold light into the alley. Caleb stepped out, perfect tuxedo, perfect face, perfect lie. There you are, he said, reaching the word like a hand. I looked at Vincent Cross and made the first reckless choice of my life. 72 hours, I said. Then get in, he replied. I got into the SUV before Caleb reached the edge of the service door, and the sound of it closing behind me felt nothing like safety. It felt like stepping off a ledge because the room behind me was already on fire. The interior was warm, dark, and silent, all black leather and rain-speckled glass. My torn dress filled half the back seat, white satin spilling over my bare feet like a story I no longer believed in. Vincent slid in beside me, leaving a careful space between us that somehow felt louder than touch. One of his men shut the door. Caleb's face appeared through the wet window a second later, pale with disbelief beneath the alley light. He lifted one hand, not waving, not knocking, just pressing his palm against the glass, as if he could still claim what was behind it. "Drive," Vincent said. The SUV moved before Caleb could speak. I watched the hotel shrink behind us, its golden windows glowing like a jewelry box full of people who would soon be told I had lost my mind. My bouquet lay in my lap, crushed and dripping. The ring on my finger felt tighter with every block. I twisted it once, but it would not come off. Vincent noticed. Of course he did. "Leave it for now," he said. "It may be useful." I turned sharply. "Useful to whom?" "To prove what he tried to bind you with." His voice stayed even. "Not to bind you again." I hated how quickly he understood the difference. Outside, Chicago blurred past in wet streaks of red taillights, closed storefronts, and sidewalks shining under street lamps. "Where are you taking me?" I asked. "My estate north of the city." "Estate sounds worse than house." "It is." I almost laughed, but the sound broke before it became real. "And this room full of people trying to force an alliance. Who are they?" Vincent looked out the window for a moment. "My father's old counsel. Men who believe my position can be managed if they place the right woman beside me." "So you're using me to avoid being controlled?" "Yes." The answer was immediate. "No romance. No costume. Just truth. And I am using you to avoid being controlled." "Also yes." I looked at him then, really looked. Rainlight moved across the hard angles of his face, the set of his jaw, the gray eyes that seemed built to find exits in every room. He did not look sorry for being dangerous. He looked sorry that danger had become the language we both understood. My phone was gone, left somewhere inside the hotel. My mother was gone, buried with every warning she had tried to teach me. Caleb was behind us, probably already shaping the story. And beside me sat Vincent Cross, a man who needed a wife the way storms needed pressure, offering me terms in the back of a car at midnight. "I want my own phone before we get there," I said. Vincent reached into the side compartment and took out a sealed box. New. Unopened. He set it on the seat between us, closer to me. "Already arranged." I stared at it. "You planned for someone else." "I planned for leverage." "That is not comforting." It was not meant to be. I opened the box with wet fingers, suddenly aware of how cold I was. My hands were shaking. Not delicately. Not beautifully. Shaking the way a body does when it has been polite through too much fear. Vincent removed his coat and placed it on the empty space between us, not over my shoulders, not on my lap, just there. "Available." "No," I said automatically. "All right." He did not argue. The coat stayed where it was. That was when my throat tightened, because Caleb would have told me I was being difficult. Caleb would have draped it over me anyway and called it caring. Vincent simply let the offer remain without turning it into a debt. The phone powered on. There were no contacts, no messages, no past. For one impossible second, I envied it. Then a headline appeared in a news alert before I had even finished setting it up. "Bride vanishes from luxury Chicago wedding amid rumors of criminal interference." My stomach dropped. Vincent looked at the screen, then at me. He moved fast. He always did when he wanted people looking at anything except the truth. The SUV turned through iron gates I had not seen coming. Beyond them, a long driveway curved through dark trees toward a mansion lit in warm gold against the rain. At the top of the steps, several men waited beneath the portico, all in suits, all watching the car like they had been expecting a war instead of a woman in a ruined wedding dress. Vincent opened his door, then paused. "When we go inside, they will call you Mrs. Cross." My heart kicked. I am not. I know. He stepped out into the rain and turned back, offering no hand, only the open door and the choice beyond it. Make them believe it anyway. I stepped out of the SUV because staying inside would have made me look like cargo, and I was done being carried by other people's plans. Rain touched my bare shoulders before I remembered Vincent's coat on the seat behind me. I did not reach for it. If I was going to walk into a room full of men who thought women were alliances with pulse rates, I wanted them to see the torn hem, the ruined bouquet, the ring still stuck on my finger, and the fact that I was not hiding behind anyone's jacket. The mansion rose above me in pale stone and black windows, too large to be called a home, too quiet to be called welcoming. Under the portico, the men waiting for Vincent stared at me with the same expression guests had worn at the hotel when the bride disappeared from the script. Surprise first, then judgment, then calculation. Vincent came around the car but did not offer his arm. He stopped beside me, leaving enough space for the rain to pass between us. "Ready?" he asked. No, his gray eyes shifted toward mine. "Good. Honest starts better than ready." I hated that the sentence steadied me. We walked up the steps together. The front doors opened before we reached them, and warm light spilled across the marble floor inside. The foyer was enormous, all dark wood, brass lamps, and a staircase wide enough for a movie star entrance. But there was no music here. No flowers. No fake blessing wrapped around a contract. Just silence and men in suits watching Vincent Cross bring home a bride who looked like she had escaped a storm because she had. An older man with silver hair stood near the base of the stairs, leaning on a polished cane he clearly did not need. His eyes moved over me, stopping at the torn lace near my ankle. "This is unacceptable," he said. Vincent removed his wet gloves slowly. "This is my wife." The word hit my ribs even though I knew it was pretend. Wife. Caleb had tried to turn it into a signature. Vincent had turned it into a shield. I still did not know which one scared me more. The older man's mouth tightened. "You expect the council to believe you married a woman you found behind a hotel?" "No," Vincent said. "I expect the council to adjust." A few of the men shifted. No one laughed. I realized then that Vincent was not the loudest man in the house because he did not have to be. The room bent around him quietly, like metal remembering heat. The older man looked at me. "What is your name?" My throat felt dry. For half a second, I almost said Hannah Miller, because that was still mine. Then I remembered the headline already calling me vanished. I remembered Caleb outside the SUV, palm on the glass. I remembered debt transfers and midnight signatures. "Hannah," I said. "And I can answer questions without being inspected like damaged furniture." The silence after that was different. Sharper. Somewhere behind me, one of Vincent's men made the smallest sound, quickly swallowed. Vincent did not look at me, but I saw his hand still on the glove he was folding. The older man's eyes narrowed. Bold for someone in borrowed circumstances. Better than being sold in permanent ones. The sentence left me before fear could edit it. This time, Vincent did look at me. Not with anger. Not with warning. With something more dangerous to my balance. Interest. Real, focused interest, as if he had expected a frightened bride and found a lit match instead. The older man's face hardened, but before he could answer, a soft voice came from the staircase. "Vincent?" A girl stood halfway down, maybe 16, wrapped in an oversized gray sweater, pale hair falling loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide and anxious, fixed on me rather than the men. The whole room changed around her. Vincent's posture shifted by a fraction, barely visible, but I felt it. Every line of him became less king and more wall. "Lily," he said, quieter. "Go back upstairs." She ignored him and came down 2 more steps. "Is she the reason they cannot make you marry Valentina?" The name moved through the foyer like a cold draft. The older man with the cane snapped, "Lily." She flinched. Vincent did not raise his voice. "Do not speak to my sister that way." The room went still. Sister. This was the alliance. This was the pressure point. Not money. Not pride. A girl in a gray sweater looking at me like my ruined wedding dress might have saved her from something. I looked from Lily to Vincent, and the negotiation changed shape inside me. Caleb had needed my signature. Vincent needed a wife. But Lily needed an escape from a room where men spoke about women like doors to be locked. I lifted my chin. "If anyone is asking whether I chose to be here," I said, my voice clearer than I felt I did. Vincent's eyes returned to mine. For the first time, the faintest crack appeared in his control. Not a smile. Not gratitude. Something quieter. Recognition. The older man struck his cane once against the marble, not hard, just enough to reclaim attention. Then prove it at the council table. Vincent's gaze darkened. Not tonight. I stepped forward before he could refuse for me. Tonight is exactly when. Tonight is exactly when. The words left my mouth before I had time to measure their danger, and once they were out, every man in the foyer looked at me like I had stepped onto a chessboard wearing white satin and no sense of self-preservation. Maybe I had. My feet were cold against the marble. My dress was torn. My hair had fallen from its careful wedding pins, and rainwater still ran down the back of my neck. I did not look like anyone's wife. I looked like the evidence of a failed transaction. But Lily stood frozen on the staircase, her face pale, her fingers gripping the banister as if the entire house might tilt if she let go. That was what kept me from taking the words back. Vincent turned toward me slowly. Hannah. Just my name. Not a warning. Not a command. Still, it carried weight. You said 72 hours, I reminded him. This is part of the hours. The older man with the cane watched us with narrowed eyes. She speaks for you now? Vincent did not look away from me. No, then he turned to the man. She speaks for herself. The silence after that made my pulse stumble. It was not romantic. It was not soft. It was the sound of a room discovering a rule it did not like. The council table was in a room beyond the foyer, a long dark dining room with windows facing the rain and portraits of cross men staring down from paneled walls. No women in the paintings. I noticed that immediately. Men in black suits took seats along both sides of the table. Vincent sat at the head, because of course he did. I stood beside the chair to his right until one of the men gave a small, amused breath. Do brides not sit where they come from? He asked. Usually beside the groom, I said, and pulled the chair out myself. The legs scraped across the floor too loudly. Good. Let the house hear me. Vincent's mouth did not move, but his eyes warmed by half a degree. The older man introduced himself as Thomas Cross, Vincent's uncle, though he spoke like an owner reading damage reports. He explained the situation in clean phrases that hid dirty hands. The family required stability. The alliance with the Moretti family would protect Lily. Vincent had acted impulsively. My appearance was inconvenient. Temporary theatrics would not overturn long-standing arrangements. Arrangements, I said quietly. Thomas looked at me. Yes, Mrs. Cross. Arrangements. The title landed between us. Fake. Sharp. Useful. I folded my hands on the table so no one would see them shaking. I spent the last hour learning how men use polite words when they mean to trap a woman. Arrangement sounds a lot like one of those words. Several heads turned. Thomas's jaw tightened. You know nothing about this family. I know enough to recognize when a girl on a staircase looks afraid of her future. That made the room change. Not explode. Just tighten. Lily had not come into the dining room, but I could feel her presence somewhere beyond the door, listening. Vincent's voice came low from beside me. Hannah. This time, I heard the caution. I ignored it, which was either brave or stupid, and I had no energy left to separate the two. You wanted proof I chose to be here, I said, looking at Thomas. Fine. I chose this room over the ballroom I ran from. I chose a 72-hour agreement over a lifetime of paperwork someone else wrote. I chose terms. Separate room. My own phone. The right to walk away. If your alliance cannot survive a woman asking for that much, maybe it was never protection. No one spoke. Rain tapped against the windows like fingers counting down. Thomas leaned back slowly. And what does Vincent get from this noble performance? I looked at Vincent then. He had gone very still. Not angry. Not surprised. Something harder to read. He gets time, I said. And his sister gets a choice. The word sister did what no argument had done. It cracked something under the table. A younger man near the end shifted uncomfortably. Another looked away. Thomas's cane rested against his knee, his fingers curved around the handle. You are very confident for a woman who arrived barefoot. I glanced down at my cold feet beneath the ruined dress. That is because I learned tonight that shoes are not what make a woman stand. For the first time, Vincent Cross smiled. Not the smirk from the alley. Not the dangerous curve that made him look like a man who could buy silence by the pound. This was smaller. Almost unwilling. Thomas saw it and hated it. The council will reconvene in the morning, he said. Until then, your bride is a question, not an answer. Vincent stood, and every chair seemed to become less comfortable around him. Then asked carefully. He turned to me. We're done for tonight. I rose too quickly, and the room blurred for half a second. Vincent noticed, but he did not touch me. He simply moved his hand near the back of my chair, close enough to steady if I chose to lean, far enough not to claim. I did not lean. But I knew I could. Outside the dining room, Lily waited in the hallway, eyes bright. She whispered as I passed, "Thank you." 2 words. Smaller than the storm. Heavier than the ring still stuck on my finger. And suddenly, 72 hours felt much longer than I had agreed to. The guest room Vincent gave me had a lock on my side, just like he promised. That should not have made me cry. It was only a small brass turn bolt beneath the handle, nothing dramatic, nothing beautiful, but I stood in front of it for nearly a minute with my ruined bouquet in one hand and my wedding ring still trapped on the other, staring at proof that someone dangerous had remembered my terms better than the man who had almost become my husband. The room itself was quiet and gray, overlooking the rain-dark gardens behind the estate. A fire burned low in a marble fireplace. Fresh clothes sat folded on the bed, black sweatpants, a soft white sweater, thick socks, all with the tags still attached. Beside them was the phone Vincent had given me, a charger, a glass of water, and a note written in neat block letters. Door locks from inside. No one enters unless you say so. Press 9 for Mrs. Vale. Press 0 for me. I read it twice, then hated myself for how badly I wanted to believe it. Caleb had called control protection. Vincent wrote protection down like instructions and left the room. I locked the door. The click sounded louder than the storm. For the first time all night, nobody was watching me. That was when the shaking started. Not graceful trembling. Not the kind of sadness that looks pretty in candlelight. My whole body turned against me, teeth chattering, knees weak, breath breaking apart as if the ballroom, the alley, the council table, and Lily's whispered thank you had all been waiting outside my skin for permission to enter at once. I sank onto the edge of the bed and pulled at Caleb's ring again. It would not move. My finger was swollen from rain and panic, and the diamond looked obscene against my skin, bright and smug, like it still belonged to the story he had written. I tried soap from the bathroom. Lotion. Cold water. Nothing worked. The harder I pulled, the more trapped I felt. Finally, I grabbed the new phone and pressed 0 before pride could stop me. Vincent answered on the first ring. Hannah? Just my name. No impatience. No victory. I swallowed. The ring will not come off. Silence, brief and focused. Do you want help? I closed my eyes. There it was again. Want. The word kept arriving where order should have been. Yes. I will send Mrs. Vale. No, the answer left me before I understood it. I opened my eyes, staring at the ring. You. But bring her too. All right. He arrived 3 minutes later with Mrs. Vale, a woman in her 60s with silver hair, warm eyes, and the kind of calm that made panic feel slightly embarrassed. Vincent stayed outside the doorway until I unlocked it myself. He did not step in until I moved back. Mrs. Vale carried a small tray with ice, thread, oil, and a towel. Engagement rings always think too highly of themselves, she said, and I almost laughed. Almost. She sat beside me and worked gently, wrapping thread beneath the band, easing the swelling down, murmuring ordinary things about rain and nerves and stubborn jewelry. Vincent stood near the fireplace, turned slightly away, giving the moment more privacy than Caleb had ever given my thoughts. The ring slid free with one sharp sting and dropped onto the towel. Such a small sound. Such a huge ending. My hand looked naked without it. Bruised, pale, mine. Mrs. Vale patted my wrist. There now. She left with the tray and the ring, asking no questions. Vincent remained by the fire. What will you do with it? I asked. Whatever you want. I looked at him. Can it help prove the documents? Maybe. Then keep it as evidence. His eyes held mine. Evidence, he repeated. Not memory. My throat tightened. Exactly. The phone on the bed buzzed before either of us could speak again. A news alert lit the screen. Missing bride seen leaving with Vincent Cross. Sources fear coercion. Under it was a photo of me stepping into his SUV, dress torn, face pale, his dark figure beside me. Caleb had found his angle. My stomach dropped. Vincent picked up the phone only after I nodded. He read the headline, then set it down carefully. He is making you look taken. Because it is easier than admitting I walked away. My voice sounded tired, but not weak. Vincent looked toward the rain-dark window. I can shut the story down. With what? Fear. He did not answer. That was answer enough. I stood, barefoot in the thick carpet, free of the ring and still not free of the lie. No, I